I'm Judith Tabrin, originally an English PhD, but been in computing for 25 years. Been an academic director of computing for about 15 years off and on at Brandeis University right here in the Boston area, and now at Hofstra University in Long Island, home of the last two presidential debates, and we hope the third will be coming up. So this is the session description. If you're not in the right place, feel free to find the other room. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, I feel like a lot of CIOs are still trying to figure out how do they get into the academic mission? How do they align their expenditures or their activities with the academic mission of the college? And I feel like after the keynote we had this morning, I want to make an answer to Paul LeBlanc's argument for disaggregation. I've spent a lot of time talking about aggregation, centralization. What are the cost benefits of that, or what are the outcome benefits of that? So, you know, I have this argument with my friend Conchetta Stewart, who's the provost at Mercy College. She had a whole career in technology before she became an academic at all. And Mercy College has just outsourced all of their IT. It's not core to her mission. But you lose some things with that. You lose control, you lose agility, you lose the ability to innovate. I feel like that's a whole separate talk. But I want to start by just saying you have to sell your services to your academic customers by being awesome and by offering what faculty want. And I think that if nothing else, maybe I can give you a little bit of a lens into what faculty want. If that has been a challenge for you, or if you're still trying to figure out how to get out of just offering business services and you really want to think about what's core, because I'm sure you all know that if you're not core, then you can be disaggregated, and that's not fun. Ideally, academic technology should be the cheapest part of IT. I say this all the time, and it's really true. Your largest expenditure is going to be staff, and after that you're going to have the LMS, and your costs just go down from there. So my buddies in administrative computing and networks, they're spending millions more than I am spending. It is actually quite cheap to do some things for academic users, and that's the good news. It's also the core of higher ed IT, anything you do for instructional support, and I think that that's a word that I'd like to plant in your mind, instructional, is core to your university mission, no matter what type of an institution you work at. That's just hands down the case. I think a lot of times we think about the utility of IT, keeping the lights on, we think about the business processes of our institution, but we don't necessarily think about the core mission of the institution, which is going to be instruction, no doubt about it. You know how to do this, though. Low cost investment, big return on investment. That's what you want. Pilot, you want a slow ramp up for your licensing or deployment costs. You want to measure your uptake constantly. You do not want to be afraid to sunset tools. If it takes you 5 years, well, obviously it takes us 20 years to sunset an ERP, right? But you should sunset something in 2 years if you have no academic uptake at all. Hopefully you should have a quicker innovation time frame with this. And if that sounds to you a little bit more like the Silicon Valley agile development cycle, then you're right. Well, what kinds of return on investment? If you're in Silicon Valley, you have to have dollars, unless you're Amazon. I don't know what it is with them, that they've never run a profit and their stock is skyrocketing this month. But in academics, what you want to have for a return on investment is how many faculty are using the product, how many students are using the product. I ask my faculty customers a lot, how many courses are going to use this? How many students are enrolled in those courses? Those are the measurements that you really want. If you're really cooking, you're going to get to the point where you're going to have measurable academic outcomes, like Paul LeBlanc was talking about this morning, right? Are you graduating more students, and are they more successful at what they're supposed to be doing? But even before you get to that point, if you want to be aligning what IT is doing with what faculty are doing, you could just talk about, are the faculty happy? And in this case, I'm really being quite clear about what the faculty want, not what the students want. But are the faculty feeling like they're doing something with IT that they couldn't do before? What can the students do that helps them learn that they couldn't do before? And what class is it for? In my group's rule 1 is, what class is it for? You'd be amazed at how many requests you get for IT support for things that have nothing to do with anything instructional on your campus. I know it's really important that we hold a conference on the development of the helicopter, but we're not going to spend a lot of IT resources on that. We're going to spend IT resources on a class that happens every semester that has 150 students in it. And it's not as hard as it seems. I think when you talk to faculty, or when you start, I have 9 colleges now. I had 6 when I started at Hofstra, or 5. We now have 9 colleges. We've opened a medicine college. We're opening our School of Nursing this fall, new School of Engineering, and Health and Human Services. And that was on top of the colleges we already had. And it feels like you get down in the weeds very quickly when you start talking to your academic customers about all the different things that they're doing. And it looks like their first question for you is always, will you buy this for me? Right? That's the first question. It's okay to say no, but you're looking for places where you can aggregate and add value. You're not going to go, you want to establish a partnership with them, not based on what you can buy for them, but what you can do for them. And research computing, I feel like a lot of my colleagues get very frustrated or very frightened of research computing. In my experience, it is not that different from any other type of computing either. Either it's something that can be aggregated or it's a one-off and you treat it accordingly. Academic users are not actually as diverse as it seems. So you want to go for consolidation by tool, not by purposes. You want to understand the purposes, but you want to go by the tool. Some examples. So your biology department has students who are turning in annotated images of high-resolution slides of subcellular organisms. You have a GIS department that's doing very large data sets with GIS. You have an engineering department that's doing AutoCAD. That sounds really different. It's not. It's just storage. Okay? So what you're doing is you're going and looking with your partners at what are you trying to do and aggregate by the tool. What can I offer you? I can offer you storage. And you say, well, I'm already offering them storage. But are you offering them 100 gigabytes per student such that students in the class can see each other's work? That's an academic purpose, right? If they want to be able to work on things as a team, are you facilitating that? An LMS will not do this, by the way. And I'm not trashing any particular LMS, although I'm happy to trash LMSs afterwards if we'd like to get together and do that. But they just aren't good at this. All right, so that's just an example of the different types of things you're looking for. If you really do have high-performance computing needs on your campus, and I truly strongly doubt that you do. Leo Donnelly, I think it is, just gave a great presentation on this on the New York CIO's conference 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure you can still find his contact information online. The Massachusetts Green High Computing Center is right here. You have it. In your state, you can apply for space at that institution. It goes by cost, so if you need to pay for space in that performance computing center, you can. In New York, we have the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York Blue. So these things, I think, are being done on a state-by-state level or a community level. You're not going to build a high-performance computing center on your own. The data cluster processing days, I think, are a little bit gone. Grid computing, that kind of, I think that fashion is over. If you need those kinds of resources, you're going to do those either, like I said, on a cost basis or in collaboration with your colleagues. So how do you do this? When you go and you offer something to these customers, you're going to have to offer them something that's not what they have. And I'll guarantee you in most cases what they still have is a guy, and he solves problems if they happen. This is not cost effective. It's also a really crappy career. Those guys are hard to hold on to. They're almost all guys. And they're hard to hold on to because to be a jack of all trades is not a career path. It's a crappy job description. It's hard to hire for. So what you can offer instead is I'm going to give you a core of professionals who work together as a team. I'm going to give you 85 people in central IT who are going to solve all of your problems. But you're not going to have problems if they happen. And that's what I'm saying is it's easier to sell some services if you're awesome. You have to cut down your problems as much as possible so that you don't need a guy sitting around to solve things. So I'm going to try and give you a balance here between sort of rules of thumb and case studies that we could chat about more. I'm easy to find. Fortunately, Judith Tabron is a fairly unique name if you want to search for me online. If it's not the chef who's in New Zealand, it's me. So if you want to, chat with me later, call me or email me, whatever, we could talk about some of these things. But just to throw out some project ideas, when we were centralizing academic support to fund distance learning, we had a bunch of guys in different areas of the college. We pulled them in centrally and we said, we're going to have them work part of the time on distance learning faculty development, and then the rest of the time they're going to work for these individual business units. But we're also going to centralize your desktop acquisition, your desktop deployment, and your software management. So they don't need to be replicating those services 6 times in different areas of the university. This is not rocket science, right? But a lot of schools, I find, are still very resistant to it. So that's just one case study. And I think I'm probably one of the few academic computing departments that funds itself. We do generate more than $6 million of revenue in distance learning tuition now per year. And we did that within 5 years of launching the programs. So we went from 0 distance learning to, I think now we have 8 master's degrees and certificates throughout the different colleges. One of the things that's very important is to mediate religious arguments. You will not always succeed in this. I don't know why we still need Minitab and MATLAB and every other math. We still have a couple of Mathematica users. Well, I do know why. Because they've written 10 years worth of scripts for those products, and they're not going to consolidate into one. But in cases where you can, you want to mediate those religious disputes, not because you're attached to any particular platform or product, but again, just to consolidate, to centralize. And then you don't have to have the duplicate effort of acquiring, licensing, and deploying all those different products. You want to see if your customers are willing to standardize. In some cases, I've had a lot of bad luck with this, but in some cases, I've had a really easy win because chaos leads to pain. And when the customers are already in pain, they're actually quite happy to do something that's less chaotic and less painful. I standardized classroom building right after I got to Hofstra, and that was something that my colleagues said, you'll never get a classroom standardized plan, that's just crazy talk, Judith. But actually, Hofstra was in so much pain from having, like, I think at the time we had 23 rooms, none of them were the same at all. Now we have 206 rooms, and they are on an identical deployment plan, and at least the control screens for the faculty all look the same, so that was actually an easy win. And these are the soft skills that you keep seeing in all the magazines that CIOs are going to need going forward, right? Discussing, negotiating, reaching a consensus. If this is not something you've been used to doing in an IT area, I would encourage you to develop those skills, because that's where you cannot work with the academic units if you cannot do this. You have to negotiate between their religious disagreements, but also the religious disagreements they will have with people inside your own group. And you have to arrive at a consensus. This is not a, we're just going to tell you what to do kind of a process. And you'd say, oh, well, we never tell them what to do. But go and actually talk to them and see how often they think you do that. It's interesting. This is my IT pyramid. I've been using this for 15 years. I don't think I've had a good reason to change it. I'm not sure it's smart anymore. But this is how I think of deploying resources and organizing what you're doing for your customers. The things that are on the base are for everyone. So data storage, I gave you that one. It's an easy one. Your LMS, you don't want to have a bunch of LMSs. I think UCLA even is down to 8. They had 14 a few years ago, and I think they were coming down from 106 because everybody had an LMS under their desk. But you know, theoretically, you don't want to have more than one LMS, so that's kind of an easy one. Disk storage, support, help desks, right? You don't want to have 15 help desks. You don't want to have 4. If you can, centralize. Above that, though, is where you start getting into the weeds. So what's field specific? The math people are not going to need exactly what the communications people are not going to need exactly what the education people need. So then you start getting into different applications, maybe different labs for them. I know there's been some sessions at this conference about labs and support areas and different training options. And then the one-offs at the top, which is where you're going to have your innovation. You have to reserve that innovation budget. There has to be some opportunity for innovation, both for you and for your customers. And just as a FYI, this is how I slice it. My staff get all 3. This is how you retain and get good people. My staff, my 11 faculty specialists, both technology and instructional design specialists, take shifts in our support center because it's a crappy job that nobody wants to do 40 hours a week. And by sharing it, they have to keep in touch with the customers on the front line, but then they also get to do the fun things for a specific field, maybe where they have a graduate degree, and then one-off innovations where we're really forging new territory. And that's partly how I keep them happy and satisfied. They get to be moving their careers forward, they get to be moving the institution forward, but they also share in the load of the first-line support. And distance learning I have found to be exactly the same way, actually. Most of the courses you're going to offer online or in a hybrid model are going to have exactly the same needs. There's going to be some people with specific needs for their field, and then there's going to be a couple of innovators. A couple of pieces of advice. Do not build it. They will not come. I talk to so many CIOs who say, I'm going to throw this out. I'm going to build this. It's so easy. It's so cheap, even for $50,000, which is not super expensive for a campus-wide product. If you don't have any faculty takers, then it was a pointless campus-wide product, right? And you say, well, I'll have student takers. If it's a commodity product, then you're going to have to compete with Dropbox and Pandora and all the things that your students already use. I would recommend not competing in that space. You're not really trying to get students to use your services. You're trying to get faculty to use your services, because if faculty do it, then their students will do it because they have to for class. And now you're a core part of the institution, if that makes some sense. Does that make some sense? I love there's like 4 people who are nodding for me. Thank you, I need that. A little bit of feedback. I don't like this like sitting up here and doing this kind of presentation, but you have to sit and listen. So feel free to go, no, that makes no sense. Have some sort of a ramp-up plan in your head, right? And here's one Judith Tabor fact that you will never hear anybody else, but I've never heard anybody contradict it. Give me some data if you've got it. I've been watching this for about 8 years. I have not seen a single school where more than 20% of the faculty adopt any new technology. I started noticing this when Penn State was giving presentations about their blogs and wikis, and they're like, it's fantastic, 1,800 classes doing this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, how many courses do you offer at Penn State? And they're like, 65,000. So I'm watching, and I've been watching for a while. I have never seen more than 20%. In fact, I would say if you get 20%, you're doing great. So think about that when you're thinking about a product you're going to use for academic uses. Most of your faculty will never use this. Right? Stop worrying about what the usage is going to cost you. My colleagues in networks and systems are always like, well, what if we license this for 10,000, 15,000 people? I'm like, you're not going to license that for 15,000 people. You'll be lucky to license that for 2. You have to offer awesome services. And Willett & Associates, which is right up here, also based in the Boston area, and they've been at NERComp and a couple of other areas, have some great workshops on how to sell IT. If you're not comfortable with the idea of selling central IT services, I suggest you get comfortable with that, because if you want to be aligned with the academic mission, probably many of you have the experience already of the faculty saying, if we want you, we'll call you. You have to sell, right? And you have to have something awesome to sell. You have to also offer what they need, not what you wish they wanted. So for those of you who, like me, have been hoping that they would use some innovative, revolutionary use of technology that would be democratic and student-centered and active learning, that's probably not what they're going to come to you for first, and you're going to have to offer them what they want first. The needs requirements are to elicit from them, well, what is your pain point? What are you actually looking for? And you have to exceed the status quo. That's not that tough, right? If they've got just a guy who's sitting around waiting for something to break. Aggregate custom setup or programming services. There's a lot of downtime in the work of the local IT digital servant. This is a phrase that I have definitely spread around our campus. We're not going to provide digital servants. We don't provide a servant who's just going to sit there in case you need something. We're going to provide you with a computer that works every single time. We're going to test that thing extensively. I'm going to have spares. I'm going to have a response time of less than a minute if you call with an emergency. I'm going to have a repair window of less than 2 hours, and you're never going to have to worry about that again. That's what you want to offer them, if you can. So as an example, classroom testing. This is a custom program that we wrote. All of our classrooms happen to have Windows machines in them, although they have laptop hookups so you can bring your own Mac. Obviously, you can see I've got a Mac or Ubuntu box, whatever floats your boat. But we extensively test the Windows machines that are in each classroom. This used to be a big staff issue, but now we've written an automatic program that runs on a USB key so the student employees can just walk around, they plug in this USB key, they test the machine, and they can not only test, does everything work, the CD player works, the DVD player works, et cetera, but it also knows what software is supposed to be deployed in what classrooms based on the faculty requests. So if this room was supposed to have, everything has SPSS, but if this room was supposed to have Minitab in it, it says, hey, I'm in CV Star 208, this room's supposed to have Minitab, it doesn't have it, and it forges a ticket to the help desk to have that fixed. If you, like us, have been having problems with software license compliance, if companies that probably should remain nameless but are probably called Adobe have been coming in to squeeze you for money because they don't like the way you have your licenses deployed, then this is quite critical because you can also have something that will test and make sure that nothing's deployed that shouldn't be deployed. Right? Automatic program, stick it in, run, that kind of thing. And another example, software acquisition. It's really simple, it's cheap. But do you run a service where you will say, oh, you wanted an in vivo license? Well, you have 2 and he's got 4, so we're going to put them all together and we're going to negotiate a better agreement for you next year. It's not a crazy plan. Offer it as a service. We did that. It's also going to streamline reporting requirements for security and for CMDB. So if you need to know, for instance, I bounced this license server. These are the 4 academic products that were running on it. These are the 6 classes that use that. You're going to know that if you care about licensing, if you care about aggregate license management. Okay? Or I've lost the data from these programs because it was hacked and now I have a HIPAA incident or I have something like that. You're going to know a little bit more about what your situation is. And I already talked about combining the testing software with the license database. Oh, we're doing good. Are we doing good? Yeah. You want to simplify and deliver leases, acquisitions. This is a crazy one. For some reason, we were just handing out money to different areas of the school when I got there. And they would buy some faculty a computer every year, I guess because they were super special. And then they would buy other faculty no computers. And so then you just do a central lease product. You say everybody gets a computer every 3 years. And there's a lot of complaints about we don't need them replaced that often or my computer's not special enough. But you know, at least you're assuring a certain level of service for everybody in the group. That's usually pretty easy to sell. Here's one that I will like, and then I'm probably going to have to wrap up. Value communication and reliability over everything else. This is one where my colleagues often give me blank looks, and I guess I don't really understand, coming from the teaching background, what's weird about this. But any good faculty member can teach a class without technology. But did you tell them what was happening? You know, we have a product where if a classroom problem comes in, we push a button and it automatically pulls the teachers who were scheduled to teach in that room and forges an email to them and says, your classroom is broken. We're going to inform you when it's fixed, but we want you to know before you teach. Because if you emailed me at 11 o'clock about my 12 o'clock class, I bring in an alternate class plan. But if I walk into the room and the technology is broken, I'm pissed. And then we notify them all when it's fixed. Right? That's, again, not super tough, but I'm not sure that in central IT we think about that kind of communication often enough. That's the kind of communication that makes the difference between your faculty really using technology, because a lot of them will be like, I can't trust it. I need it to work for my class. And you say, I will tell you exactly what's happening with it every minute of the day. That's okay. There are no slipped deadlines in education, as much as you've all had a faculty member who did that. And then I'll wrap up with this example. I like this one. In our classrooms, we all have we have phones and all. We went back and retrofitted the ones that didn't have it. And we had we did a bunch of different models for classroom service and faculty computing, the help desk, blah, blah, blah. Now, with the new ACD phone queue system that we have, every classroom on campus is part of its own ACD phone queue. A call from that phone and no other phone goes straight to the front of the list of the call answering queue, and it goes to a pool of 9 technicians who will answer it. They get the highest priority on campus the fastest. So if you need help in a classroom and you have a bunch of 19-year-olds staring at you like you're an idiot, which is the worst situation any faculty member can imagine, we will be right there. We will pick up the phone and we will go and we will respond. The first day we rolled this out, we had only about 11 calls, and we answered them all in 38 seconds or less. So I'm really proud of this one because, again, what does the faculty member need? The faculty member needs not to be standing there like an idiot in front of their class. I have faculty members who've had that experience that won't go back to technology for 10 years. Right? So what do they need? They need immediate help. And that's probably a good place to stop. I feel like a half an hour was too short for this, but then you got to get to lunch. I don't know if anybody has any questions or thoughts that they wanted to chat about before we wrap up. Yes, sir, in the back. So we'll have some beers later. I find that actually in my institution, and I'm giving faculty orientation every fall, I have the same proportion of faculty coming in who are used to teaching with technology as I've ever had. Still, most of my faculty are being hired for their research background. They're not that familiar with technology. They're nervous about it. And 80% of them will tell me that nobody has ever talked to them about how to use technology in the classroom. I would say that most of your faculty members who are that wedded to their technology probably need PowerPoint, maybe that much. But I, of course, am always looking to get beyond PowerPoint. Okay, that makes a big difference. Yeah. I think a lot of these strategies would still work in terms of aggregating central services, but you may already be there. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You know, administration likes data-driven, this and that.
Yeah.
And we, of course, like to keep documentation. What is your take on work orders? You know, this one side says, put a work order in before we can even address this.
Yeah.
Or others will say, like, no, you've got a flat on the side of the road, you don't have time for a work order.
That's right.
You've got to fix it. So can you give us kind of your take on all that?
We track every single thing. We've had 2,006 contacts with faculty over the last 9 months. 800 unique faculty have used emergency call services. We track everything. We put in an emergency ticket that we have a system again, because it's easy to write a program that's like, click a button, what was the call that came in, pull that person's number out of your ERP and say, this is the person who just contacted me, and record that. That's all. That's it. It's not really an incident. You don't even have to record anything about it. If it's an incident, of course, it has to go in your ticketing system. But we do record everything, because otherwise, how do you know what your uptake is? You really don't know who is using your services. It might be one person who just cannot grasp embedding pictures in PowerPoint, right? You cannot spend a ton more IT resources on that person. So I would agree with the tracking. There's got to be a limit to the data, but I agree with tracking everything, and we could talk more about that too after I have beers with that guy. There was one other question over here. Yes, sir?
I noticed you wrote a custom application for more or less central management using USB vehicles. Do you have an overriding client management system that you use?
By overriding client management system, you mean?
System Center, Altiris, Casper.
We do. We have a SCCM for endpoint deployment and that sort of thing. I have one Windows programmer on my staff I only have 15 people altogether and 11 in faculty computing. That one guy has written every custom thing I need, and I don't need a lot of custom things, but everything that guy writes is for the whole campus. So I don't want to get caught up in custom code for the rest of my life. That's actually not a great plan, but if I did need something that's quick and dirty, faster iteration, right? Fail faster. Everything all the Silicon Valley people are telling you, I can't wait for administrative computing from me. Submit a work order. What? Let's go, right? So I do have one programmer on my team that can write those things for me, and we scale some of them up and we sunset others of them. And fortunately, like I said, I'm in a Windows-only environment. I'd be in an HTML5 environment, I guess, if I had to do it cross-platform or something different. What's that? Comment for the peanut gallery that I can't hear. I agree with it, whatever it is. All right, so it's 12:30 and it's time for lunch. Thank you guys for spending some time with me. Good for you guys.